I will now have the judges introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Michael Anderson. I'm a retired professor and a retired college administrator. I currently work with the local students in our high school who are of Ojibwe descent, Native Americans. Molly?
Hi, my name is Molly Russell. I'm an attorney at Legal Aid of West Virginia who specializes in domestic violence law, and this is the first time I'm judging the national competition.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ed Philpott. I'm a trial lawyer, and my practice is in central New Hampshire, but I am actually from central New Jersey.
Excellent. Could you introduce yourselves, please, and your teachers?
Hi, I'm Safstar.
Hi, I'm Shasta.
Hi, I'm
Hi. Sorry. Hi, I'm Marlena.
My name is Alexandra.
My name is Rihanna, and our teacher is Mr. Mondry.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon to you. So just to be clear, we are in New Jersey, correct? And we are unit 4, question 1. We all together? Okay, I'll read the question in its entirety before you begin your prepared statements. Are you ready? Okay. Unit 4. How have the values and principles embodied in the Constitution shaped American institutions and practices? Question 1, quote, "It would be inconsistent with the constitutional separation of the executive and legislative powers to let the prerogative, meaning the pardon power, be exercised by the latter," unquote. What were the framers' reasons for giving the president the pardon power? And do you agree or disagree with them? Bullet 1. According to the framer James Wilson, if the president abuses the pardon power, he can be impeached and prosecuted. Do you agree with Wilson? Why or why not? Bullet 2. In your opinion, what constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors? You may begin.
The framers gave the president the pardon power to mitigate the harshness of improper punishment and restore public order during times of domestic upheaval. The framers gave this power to the executive branch instead of the legislative branch because, as Madison said, numerous bodies were actuated more or less by passion. For example, President Obama commuted the sentences of over 1,000 nonviolent drug offenders in an act of mercy because he felt the criminal justice system failed them. The pardon power was also granted to the president to allow society to move on. In fact, President Washington's first pardon was for the leaders of the Whiskey Rebellion to prevent further rebellions from ensuing.
While we agree with the framers' reasons for creating the pardon power, the lack of limitations placed upon them make it too easy for this power to be abused. As George Mason argued, the executive may frequently pardon powers which are advised by himself. He will establish a monarchy and destroy the republic. To address these concerns, the framers made it so that Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution states that the president has the power to grant pardons except in case of impeachment. However, we have still seen the pardon power be abused, as President Clinton granted Mark Rich to thank him for his generous campaign donations, and President Trump pardoned Roger Stone after he was convicted for lying to Congress about his knowledge of Russian interference in the election. These are exactly the kind of abuses that Mason feared, yet the impeachment limitation created did nothing to prevent this.
Before discussing James Wilson's opinion on presidential pardon power abuse, we must first discuss what constitutes as high crimes and misdemeanors. They are any act, criminal or non-criminal, that goes beyond designated powers and involves moral turpitude. High crimes and misdemeanors, a term used by the House of Commons to check abuses of ministerial powers, is mentioned in Article 2, Section 4 as reasoning for grounds of impeachment. This was included in the Constitution, so the grounds of impeachment could be broader and cover non-criminal offenses of those being impeached in the House of Commons.
For example, Warren Hastings, the governor of Bengal, was impeached in 1787 due to his corruption allegations, non-criminal acts that fell under high crimes and misdemeanors. This clearly shows that the meaning of the phrase is to be interpreted as a serious abuse of power. In 1998, President Bill Clinton was impeached on the grounds of perjury and obstruction of justice, despite this being unrelated to the presidency. While he was acquitted, we see that under the term high crimes and misdemeanors, there is a broader scope under which to impeach the president, allowing for more scrutiny to be placed upon the executive branch.
Now, to revisit Wilson's argument, we agree with him because according to our understanding of the phrase abuse of pardon power is a high crime and misdemeanor, and thus an impeachable offense. Therefore, high crimes and misdemeanors cover the abuse of presidential pardon power, also a non-criminal act, because it parallels how the House of the Commons used this phrase to control similar abuses of ministerial power in the English government.
This phrase is also used to check the president when they fail to faithfully execute their office, such as when the House of Representatives attempted to impeach President Andrew Johnson for pardoning the most active and formidable leaders of the rebellion in the Civil War. Moreover, during the Virginia Ratifying Convention, James Madison addressed limitations that Congress could place on the pardon power, saying, "If the president be connected in any suspicious manner with any persons, and there be grounds to believe he will shelter himself, the House of Representatives can impeach him," showing clear intent by the framers to make the abuse of the pardon power an impeachable offense as a way to uphold the checks and balances between the executive and legislative branches.
Okay, thank you. You talked early and often, I think, about the notion that we ought to restore the nation after upheavals or unrest. If we argue that the January 6th insurrection at Congress and Senate was in fact an upheaval, do you recommend that we pardon all the people involved there on the same logic?
I don't think that we should pardon the people involved on that same logic, because I believe that what we were trying to say is that using pardons to prevent further domestic upheaval, and I believe that by pardoning everyone involved in the January 6th riots, it would in fact split the country further and create more partisanship within the community, as they would feel that they were allowing people to have these views and attack the Capitol with no further punishments.
So how is that different from the Whiskey Rebellion when Washington pardoned two people who had rebelled against the government and were sentenced to death? When should mercy be applied?
Mercy should be applied when it agrees with the sentiments of the people as a whole, because our country is based on democratic institutions and is based on popular sovereignty. So if the people feel that the Whiskey Rebellion was justified, then they should be pardoned. But if people feel that the Capitol riots were not justified, then they shouldn't.
So how are we going to measure what the people feel?
In this day and age, we can,
Well, just to go back off of Alexander's point, this was the first pardon that Washington had passed, and it was passed to ensure that future rebellions would occur. And obviously this was not the case, but this was the intent. So the intent of of Congress of this time were really pure, and it really was to stop future things from happening. However, 200 something later is obviously the government isn't always going to have the same motive.
So what's the standard you apply to that then? If pardoning someone for one rebellion is acceptable because we want to encourage future rebellions, why wouldn't you pardon everybody involved in a future rebellion?
I think especially in this case, because by pardoning people involved in Capitol riots, I don't think it would prevent further rebellions. If anything, I think it would encourage further rebellions by showing them that they couldn't get away with this. When we look at the Whiskey Rebellion, it was there was actual intent behind it, and there was reasoning, in my opinion, because they were trying to show that they were being unfairly taxed, and they were just trying to get a voice at the time. Whereas in this case, it was more of a tantrum, if anything, the January 6th riots. So I believe that if we pardoned them again, it would just show that their behavior is allowed. But when we pardoned them for the Whiskey Rebellion, we were showing that their voices were heard. So I think that's where we're making the distinction.
And to add on to Safdar's point about the Capitol Hill riots, even though there was a group of people who did support what happened at the riots and did believe that it was justified, I think it's safe to say that majority of American people, even people in the Republican Party, thought that the riots were unjustified and was an act of something that was unnecessary and was just putting our democratic process in danger.
Go, Molly.
So you had stated that there have been pardon abuses in the past by various presidents, and that
the threat of impeachment over improper pardons didn't work. We haven't seen impeachment being drawn up because of improper pardons. So at this point, is impeachment for this offense moot? Is it relevant? Does it even matter? Does it work?
From what we've seen so far with our government and Congress, I don't believe that they also believe in impeaching someone off of bad pardons, because I want to go back to January 6th when we had the impeachment trial of Trump, of Mr. President Trump. And a lot of the reasoning that he wasn't impeached is some people in Congress felt, well, why should we impeach him if he's going to be out in a few months? So now I think if we apply that same logic to a more lighter case of a few abusive pardons, I don't think Congress will take it very seriously and try and push for a really large impeachment.
I also think that impeaching presidents who abuse their pardon power doesn't work because the impeachment process itself is flawed. It's a two-step process, so it can be approved by the House but not approved by the Senate, and then the whole thing just becomes useless and not even passed. So it might work if the impeachment process itself is changed.
So are you arguing that only one house, like the House of Representatives, should be able to impeach a president with a majority vote without going to the other branch? I mean, every president would be impeached that was of the opposite party if we did that.
I don't believe that we should do it that way. I think what you brought up, that if with the opposite party, it would be a problem. And I think that's also the point that people, like when President Trump is being impeached, some Republican senators came out and said even if they believed he was guilty, they wouldn't impeach him. And I think that we do have a problem with partisanship, and obviously on the other side too, that people might be more reliant, or like they'd be less reluctant to impeach someone. So I believe we do need the two-step process, but because of how hard it is to impeach someone, it's not a proper limitation because it's too rare for it to happen for a pardon power. That's what I think we believe.
So what do you suggest? What method should be used instead? If the threat of impeachment and impeachment you don't think is going to ever come forward, what should be done to rein in? Or do you think that a presidential pardon power should be reined in?
I do believe that, especially in this time that we do need the presidential pardon power to be reined in. I think that presidential pardon powers should have to at least be checked by Congress or the House of Representatives, and that if more than 2/3 of either branch disagree with it, that it should be overturned, because it will allow for more checks and balances to be placed upon the president and more scrutiny to be placed upon the executive branch. And while it would limit the overall pardon power, I think it's necessary, especially as we've seen in more recent years, as Trump has been impeaching Paul Manafort or Kushner, who are people directly related to himself. And it's kind of alarming that he's able to do this with no checks on his power.
I think we should actually go to the people for this problem, because if we go to a different branch of the government, there's still a risk of that giant partisanship. And we do rely on the people for really everything, because it's a popular sovereignty and a democracy. So I think that we should be able to have almost the same way that we voted a president in, we should be able to vote them out and have also an electoral college so that the
Are you
people.
saying before the regular election? You want to get the people involved? They're like a referendum, or you wait till the next election?
As in, like, when he is impeached, then we would have another vote as if it was an election to see he can go out or go in.
And does that need to pass the House and Senate first? Or I'm very curious. Tell me more about your idea.
I think it would just follow every single exact formula that the regular election would follow, in my opinion. But
So it'd be kind of like a recall election. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
exactly.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wonder how that would have played out in the last few months. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead if you have other questions.
I'm just curious.
Try not to do anything more right now. We're out of time. Sorry about that. I set you up for that one.
You did. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to give you some feedback. And why don't you go ahead, Molly? Go first.
I thought you did a great job, and it was hard, was making that distinction between the Whiskey Rebellion and the insurrection. I thought the distinction that you made showed why, okay, a pardon would be acceptable here and is definitely not acceptable with the shaman. One of them at least. I really wanted to keep going to the point at the end about the recall election. I thought that was a good suggestion. I would have liked to have heard more about it. But overall, guys, a very nice, ladies and gentlemen, a nice job. Well done.
Go ahead, Ed.
So one of the things that I think in this discussion, both questions and answers, we fell into is we sort of blurred the lines between impeachment and removal. I think when you're talking about this in future hearings, you want to be a little bit more careful about that, because impeachment occurs in the House. We've had several impeachments. We've never had a removal from office. So what I was hoping to hear you talk about was what's the impact on a president, whether it's the president's legacy or reelection or potential impeachment or potential removal. See, I just did it. What's the impact on a president, and how does that serve as a check on the president's pardon power? I think you did a great job. You had some great points and a good depth of understanding of how the power came about, what the power is and does, and what some of the problems are with it. So thank you.
I'm always amazed at how old these ideas are about pardons and citing what happened in England, what happened in Rome, or what happened in any other time in history, and then how valid those notions still seem to be today, and how we still seem to be working on it. And I guess that's your job as young people involved in civics, is to move that forwards, because I'm not sure if I would want to have the insurrectionists pardoned or not. My first response would be no. And then I hear about all these old ideas where Washington and others were saying, and even Andrew Johnson and Abraham Lincoln, let's keep them back, bring them back into the Union and prevent from further unrest. And your team is not sure either, because you're not sure whether it would make it happen again because they got away with it. So these are really good struggles that you have going on. And I guess that's your job in the future, is to work that out, because we'll be dead. But I like the idea that you took a stance on many things, like you just plain out called the impeachment process flawed. Yeah, and then you went about telling us why it was. Perfect. Getting the people involved in the end with a referendum or recall, we need to have another day for that one. I think that's an interesting idea. If we're always going to have a divided House in one party or the other, maybe there needs to be a way to get the people directly involved. And speaking of popular sovereignty, good job.
Thank you.
Way to struggle with it. Good discussions.
All right, we wish to congratulate the students on their participation and effort today. Congratulations. Let me stop the recording.